So this is interesting. It's the 1st of May. It should be past bluebell time already, and we're in a wood near Portisham, and the bluebells are only just coming out here. I think we must be on the north side of the hill, and so the microclimate here is, that looks like a grave. Oh, I think this might be, yes, a little cemetery for pets or something. So yeah, that was a little pet cemetery by the look of it. On the north side of the hill here, the bluebells are only just coming out, which is quite unusual. That's maybe 2 weeks later than the bluebells everywhere else. One solitary little bluebell there in full flower. And a few more here as we start to go round into a sunnier spot. We are also quite high up here, so I suppose the elevation probably makes a difference. Those little white dots down there are sheep, just to give you some sense of scale. What a view. And this is interesting. This is something I didn't expect to find here in Dorset, where it's quite so chalky as this. This is a bilberry bush, and it's in flower at the moment. There's the little tiny little bell-shaped flowers. Quite a lot of bilberry foliage there. Obviously this must be a little bit acidic, the soil here. It's a kind of well, you can see there's a kind of coniferous woodland up ahead, and up on the top there there's heathers, and there's a bit of heathland up there, so this must be a locally acidic hilltop. Interesting, because bilberries won't grow on chalky soil. They need acidic soil to be happy. Blackthorn sloes here in full flower, and a big old bumblebee. Look at that. And all of these little insects, all these smaller insects you see zipping about, are little solitary mining bees. Let's see if we can get close enough to see one. They don't stop for long. Yep, the tiny little solitary mining bees. They don't sting. These are the same ones you might have seen. I don't know whether you've seen the video yet, but I've got them in my lawn. I was going to try and get you a still photo of these tiny bees, but they're really cautious of people. But it's quite encouraging. I've seen at least 4 different species of bee in amongst these blackthorn flowers. It's absolutely buzzing with them. Look down there. All of those flying insects there, tiny as they are little bees. And you can see they moved away from me. So I'm going to leave them be. No pun intended. Or maybe a little bit. But they're doing really well. And then this here, this is not blackthorn. This is, because it's got no thorns on it, and it's a bit more bushy and less wiry. So I think this must be a plum or a bullis or a damson or something like that. And there's more of it up here. It's already finished flowering as well, so suggesting that's a different species. But that's finished flowering. Blackthorn down there, still flowering like crazy. Little sunnier spot here, and you can see the bluebells are out in full here. And up there, I can recognise it even from here. That kind of brownish green foliage that you see all across there, the low growing foliage, is bilberries. Except it's all fenced off. It looks like maybe this bit is not accessible to the public. It might be that there's an old mine here or a pit or something that's dangerous. So you can get in this bit to the right here, except there are deer in there, so we won't be going in there with Eva because she does like to run with them. That thing over there is Hardy's monument. Monument to Thomas Hardy. So here we go, here's some bluebells out in full flower. I should try and take a photograph of them, but photos of bluebells never come out looking quite as vibrant and purple as they do in real life. Let's see if we can identify that one. Fairly distinctive looking bee.
Yeah.
Oh, and that butterfly down there, just disappearing down there. Brimstone, common brimstone. Okay, well we will, I think, walk up to the Hardy Monument. This is the official track. Eva's going to stay on a lead because we did actually see deer inside this enclosure. Lovely beech tree here. Canopy's not quite filled in yet, but you get this gorgeous spring lime green foliage and the light filtering through it, and with the deep blue sky behind the green leaves there. Oh, isn't that lovely? Just going to stand here and enjoy that for a bit. Okay, onward to the monument. Oh, lovely view.
That's what I was thinking. Amazing.
So if I sound out of breath, someone always says it's because we climbed quite a long way today. So the car is somewhere off way down over that ridge there. The view that we initially saw is down that valley. So that's the field of rape over there. That's rapeseed oil crop. That's the one we saw at the far end of the valley. So the car is somewhere over there. And we're nearly at the monument. And now I discover the road goes right past it. There's a car up there. We could have driven to this. Oh. I suppose the exercise will do me good. So, Hardy's Monument. Yes, it is a bit phallic, isn't it? And if you're thinking of visiting, there is a car park. Oh, look at this. We can see Chesil Beach over there. See the backside of Chesil Beach. See there's a bit of sea and a sort of bar of gravel, and the sea the other side. And then we can see another bit of Chesil Beach down there. Same deal. See the Fleet Lagoon in front of it, this side of it. And then Chesil Beach the other side. And then on to the Isle of Portland over there. So we'll just have a wander around here, see if there's an inscription of any kind. There is a door, and I understand you can go up inside of it. I don't know if you can see anything in there. Can you see anything in there? But it's locked today, so I imagine you probably have to make an appointment if you want to go up inside the monument. Kind of a bit of a shame that there's graffiti here, except when you look at it, some of this is really old. And really old. Some of this scratched graffiti here is probably decades and decades old. Alright, there is an inscription. I'll see if I can read it. Sun's in my eyes. I'll get the best photo I can, and then we will try and make sense of that. So let's see if we can figure out this panorama there. So from Hardy's Monument, over there we can see Lyme Bay. You just about see little bits of the water in between the trees over there. Coming round, down here we've got, I think, Abbotsbury down there, and then you can see a bit of Chesil Beach and the Fleet Lagoon behind it. And then further along you can see another bit of Chesil Beach with the Fleet Lagoon behind. And then we get the Isle of Portland, and then we got the whole view of the Isle of Portland there. A big chunk of limestone that slopes gradually down towards Portland Bill at the right hand side there. And then Weymouth and Weymouth Harbour, and all the way round to probably what, Osmington Cliffs or something over there. And apparently on a good day you can see the Isle of Wight. I can see something that might be the Isle of Wight over there, or it might be Studland. It's too faint to make out, but there's something over there that is land between the sea and sky. And yeah, it could be a bit of Studland, or it could be a bit of the Isle of Wight. It's a bit too misty on the water to be able to make it out, but what an amazing view. So up on the top of the hill here, near Hardy's Monument, this is an apple tree, just coming into blossom there. See a bit of pink and white blossom down there? So, actually several apple trees, possibly one of them being a seedling of the other. Perhaps grown from a discarded apple core from someone having a picnic up here near Hardy's Monument. Oh right, okay, because that is a pear tree. Different blossom. I can't get close enough to show you the difference, but pear tree blossom is pure white and it's held upright, and apple tree blossom is in little sort of slightly less formal clusters, and it's kind of just dangles and sits there. Pear blossom is usually like a little sprig of white flowers facing upwards. So that's a pear tree, those are apple trees. Cool. Just down here, this plant with all the little red flower heads is a sorrel, possibly sheep's sorrel. Tiny little leaves, but you can tell that's a sorrel because it has these little arrow shaped leaves like that, and that's an edible plant. Acidic flavour, tastes a bit like green apples or a very mild lemon. Okay, so I do feel a bit silly. I assumed this was a monument to Thomas Hardy the poet, but it's actually a monument to one of the other Thomas Hardys, the Thomas Hardy that served with Nelson of Kiss Me Hardy or Kismet Hardy fame. Probably an apocryphal story, but this is not Thomas Hardy the poet, this is Thomas Hardy the seafarer. So apparently this is intended to look like a naval spyglass. Okay, if you say so. So it is strange. The rest of the world, well, we're getting photos from friends saying the bluebells are out. Look at the bluebells. And here, at least on the north side of Hardy's Monument, they've got another week or two before they're going to be really properly up. There are one or two of them about though. So I suppose that's good actually. It means there's a place here you can come and see bluebells if you're a bit late to the game. So again, red currants here in the woods. All of these plants here are red currants. Lots and lots of flowers on them as well. So going to be worth coming back here for some berries in the summer. Bilberry and red currant tart or something. How does that sound? So almost back to our starting point now. And that was our little walk. Well, actually we walked quite a bit further than I intended to, but that was our walk to Hardy's Monument, and where we discovered it wasn't the Hardy that I thought it was. It's time for the comment positivity section, where I'm just going to pick out a handful of comments that either made me smile or laugh, or maybe asked an interesting question that I'd like to answer. So let's have a look. Right, have you got malva, aka mallow, aka cheeseweed in your area? All parts are edible it seems, but if you take some leaves, wash them, trim away the centre rib, don't cut it out completely, just shave it away so the leaf lays flatter, and fry them in a little oil, shake on a little salt. They're like the best potato chips you've ever had. Well, that sounds really interesting. Yes, we have got mallow in the area, we've got lots of different species of mallow actually, but common mallow is probably the one to try it with. That sounds interesting, and when next time I stumble across common mallow, I'm going to give that a try. Next one's a question about Eva. I mentioned in a video that you might be able to hear the noise of the dog carpet swimming in the background. Someone asked, what is carpet swimming? I need to know what your beautiful Eva does for carpet swimming. Okay, well, here's an example of carpet swimming. You all right? It's really good to see that I still get comments on the keyboard unboxing video I did, where this was a Logitech keyboard where I unboxed it and the dongle for the wireless keyboard was hidden away in a secret compartment at the end of the box, and it was really easy just to throw away the box and then suddenly realise you haven't got the piece that makes the mouse and keyboard work. I still get lots of comments from people like this one saying, I literally just unpacked this keyboard and I was looking all over for the dongle. I googled MK270 no USB and thank God I saw this video, saved me a trip back to the store. Well, I'm glad that still works, and I'm a little bit disappointed that Logitech is still packing it that way. But never mind. Any plans to do a video on the new scam site Temu? Well, I'm not convinced Temu is actually a scam outright, any more than Wish is a scam outright. I haven't got any plans to do a video. I think everybody else in the world has got that adequately covered. I'm not probably going to jump on that trend. I've had a lot of people ask me or suggest that I should. I've even had Temu themselves badger me repeatedly to try and do a collaboration or integration. I'm just not, I don't do commercial collaborations, so I've said no to that. I don't know what value I could really add to the discussion for that. I mean, I suppose that could be said about a lot of my videos. What value am I really adding? But yeah, probably not going to do Temu because what's the point? Next one. I saw the other day that a Chinese research team may have found an antidote to Amanita death cap poisoning. The article I read said that death caps are responsible for 90% of mushroom fatalities, so this could be a godsend for overeager foragers. Well, it could be. I rather suspect that antidote will have limited use. Unfortunately, most people who poison themselves foraging don't realise they've done that until the onset of symptoms. I suppose it's one of those things, if you knew that you were eating the wrong thing immediately after you'd eaten it, you probably would have known it was the wrong thing immediately before and you just wouldn't eat it. So I have a feeling that even though that research obviously is positive and I think that's great, I have a feeling that by the time people turn up for treatment, it's going to be too late. The damage will already have been done. The toxins in amanitas attack the nervous system and the liver and kidneys, and it just basically destroys your internal organs and your nervous system. And by the time you start to feel ill, you're actually very ill. Anyway, we'll see. I hope it helps, but I still say that the best policy is don't put anything in your mouth unless you're absolutely certain what it is. Oh, this was on the felting video. Very cool. You made a felt tribble. Try a felt unicorn. I suppose I did. Let's have a look. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, I suppose I did make a felt tribble. Try a felt unicorn. That could be a challenge. So this is the video where I did the hop tops thing. The editing on the little plant cards at the beginning was just wonderful. How did you do it? It looked so professional and effortless. I loved it. It actually wasn't effortless. It's quite a lot of effort in Davinci Resolve. At least it is the way I do it. There might be an easier way to do it. I'm going to show you how I do it, and maybe if somebody else knows a neater trick than this in Davinci Resolve, then let me know, but this is the method. I've got this piece of footage here of me out in the hedgerows with the camera moving around. I'm just going to get rid of the audio track because it's just a distraction in this demo. And I'm going to track a piece of text so it follows that little cow parsley flower right there. So I need a piece of text. I'll just use this text object here. We'll change it to say something relevant. Okay, and then change the properties of this text object to fit the text. We'll have an outline as well, I think. And I might make it completely opaque just to make it a bit easier to see. Do you know what? I think it needs a little arrow, so I'm going to have a character map. And I'm just going to, I'll just take that arrow there from Wingdings, and we'll put that in here and format it for Wingdings, and then change the width of that text box to fit. Okay, so that's my text object. Just going to move it somewhere into the middle of the screen. Doesn't matter where at the moment. We'll deal with the exact placement later. I'm just going to extend the duration of this text object to completely cover the clip. And we can't stabilize text as it is. We have to make it into a compound clip, and then Davinci Resolve can treat it as a piece of video. Over next to the color tab, make sure I've selected my footage, because that's where I'm going to get the tracking data from. And then we're in the tracker, I'm going to choose stabilizer, classic stabilizer, and turn off zoom, and then point tracker, and add a point to the scene, and that's the point there. And actually I might just move the footage so we can see a bit better what we're doing. I'm going to move that point on top of the flower I want to track, and then tell Davinci Resolve to go to the end of the footage and then back to the beginning and track all the way. So it's going to do that now. It runs to the end of the footage and it'll jump back to where we were and go back to the beginning of the footage and track all the way. And it looks like it's done a pretty good job of tracking. So we're going to copy that track data and then go to the text object, again turn off zoom, again select classic stabilizer, and we have to change strong to -100, and I don't know why. That's just what I took from someone else's tutorial. Paste track data in. I think it might be because we're making this move instead of stopping the footage moving. So instead of stabilizing the footage, we're making this move to match the footage. So we're kind of doing the opposite of what we would be doing if we were stabilizing the footage. Anyway, I've pasted in the track data, and then I'm going to click stabilize, and then back to the edit tab, and then we can place that text object so it's in the right relative position to the flower. We haven't lost the stabilizing data there by moving this object, because it'll all be relative to what I've just moved. Okay, so let's watch it and see what we get. And I think that's done a remarkably good job of tracking that text to that object. So that's how I do it in Davinci Resolve. If there's an easier way to do it in this software, do let me know. Obviously there might be single click options to do this in Premiere or in other editing software, which won't be much use to me, but if you know of a quicker way to do this in Davinci Resolve, please do let me know, because I use this quite a lot. I probably won't do that for every plant video. I did that one in particular because there were a lot of plants in a big hedgerow, and I was just talking about one of them, and so I wanted to make sure that I was highlighting the plant that I was talking about. So I did the kind of floating tags that were tracked. Do you want to get up? Come on then. Ups. Come on. You can't have this, but you can get up. Ups. There we go. Right. I'm going to put that there now, and then you can have a cuddle. Come here. Right. Sit down. Sit down. Okay. Well, okay. The dog's now joined me for the next bit of this. So someone said, I don't understand how you can read non-grammatical English with no errors and ums so quickly. The answer is lots and lots and lots of editing. When I read a scam baiting script, typically the recording ends up being maybe 3 times the length of the finished video, and because of all the ums and stumbles and retries, and I'm not kissing you, all the ums and stumbles and retries, because it is quite difficult to read bad English and bad written text, especially when it's nonsensical and devoid of punctuation. It's actually quite difficult to do, so I have lots and lots of retries, and then I edit. And finally, you're just right in the way. And then finally, a poem. Somebody submitted a poem about Paul S., our persistent scammer who really didn't know how to let go, which I shall perform for you now. Paul S., frantic as a printing press, his mind enthralled by dirty money. Were it not sick, it would be funny. I enjoyed that. So that's it for the comment positivity section. On with the rest of the video. I'm still not kissing you. Just spotted another glowworm larva this morning on the path here. Now, in a previous video, I moved one of these off the path, thinking I was kind of helping it, because out here on the middle of a path that people walk along, occasionally drive along, this thing's quite vulnerable. But I'm not sure I did it a favour, because the females of this species are flightless, and so the only way the species can spread itself around is by walking, and so you're just likely to encounter them on footpaths. And I think the right thing to do is try not to step on them and leave them be, rather than actually try to help them, which might not actually be helpful. So another glowworm larva. That's about the 4th or 5th I've seen this week. So very hopeful that we might be able to see them glowing later in June. But it's doing what it needs to do. So I'm gonna take the default approach actually, which is usually the sensible one with anything in nature, and leave alone. So we've got another 2 just down here. So there's one right there, small one, and another one there. So quite a few of them about this morning. So I'm just going to kind of watch where I put my feet really as I walk along here this morning, make sure I don't squish any. It's good to see that they're doing so well here, and a lot of that is to do with this hedgerow, which is just being left to grow long and kind of untended. So there'll be snails in here, which are the food for these things, and there's lots of hidey holes and habitats for the glowworms to actually be safe from predators. Today's insect friend is by the front hedge here, so you might hear some traffic in a moment, but let me see how close I can get you without disturbing this. This is a damselfly. We don't have a pond, we've only got a little water feature that's got a frog living in it. I suspect this has come from some other garden somewhere nearby where they've got a pond. Let me see if I can get it in focus. Quite amazing creature, sort of electric blue-green in colour. Doesn't seem to be bothered by me at all, which is unusual. Here's an interesting thing. There's a little bit of this riverbank here that's been carved away, and while I was standing here watching, there's a bee that's repeatedly coming back to this spot, collecting a little bit of mud and flying away with it. I assume this is a solitary bee, and it's closing up its nest hole with wet mud to keep out predators. But what we have here is a bee quarry. Here by the downstairs greenhouse, there's a little water feature that was here when we moved in. It's just a barrel with an old-fashioned pump. I think there was an electrical pump in there that runs water out of that, but it doesn't seem to work. Anyway, this little water feature, despite being actually quite small, has got a guest in it. Oh, there it goes. Common frog, I think. I've got some photos I took from an earlier session that weren't actually, where I didn't disturb it and it didn't swim off. But, yeah, it's now down somewhere in the deeper water down there. So yeah, common frog in our little tiny mini pond thing. So quick review of the downstairs greenhouse. I've moved my volunteer squash seedlings out here so they can get a bit more light, but they're coming along nicely. The courgette seedlings, doing really well actually. So we're going to be planting these out today. More about that in a moment. Tomatoes, these are the tomatoes I started from seed. They're starting to pick up now, so it might still be worth planting some of these, although I've used up all of my grow bag spaces, so if I grow these on, it'll be in pots or perhaps even outside. Artichokes I've repotted, they're looking okay. My hot peppers starting to pick up again now, so I don't know, maybe it was just too cold out here. These will put on a lot of growth once I get them in the greenhouse. But the courgette plants, I've been hardening these off, so that means basically putting this outside during the day and then bringing it back in at night to get these plants acclimatized to the outdoor conditions. We're going to plant these out today in the border, but there's a few things we need to think about, because the chief enemy of courgette plants and pumpkins is windrock. Well, actually, windrock and slugs. Actually, three things: windrock and slugs and root disturbance. Amongst the many enemies of courgette plants are such elements as windrock, slugs and root damage. Anyway, so these will need to be planted out, but it's a bit breezy out there today. We're going to make a tunnel on the vegetable plot and we'll cover it with fleece, and then we'll plant these underneath fleece to keep the wind off them. Right, so we're going to have our 5 courgette plants at this end, and then 3 pumpkin plants at that end. And then if the pumpkins need to trail, they can do so all the way along the back here, because I think these are bush type courgettes, whereas my volunteer squash is a kind of trailing type. And then we just give those a good water in, just to settle the soil and to give them a good contact with the rest of the soil. There we go, just puddle those in. The tomato plants here in the upstairs greenhouse are doing really well and coming along very nicely. They do need a tiny bit of maintenance to make them grow up straight, because I want them to grow all the way up to the top of these canes before they bush out and start producing fruiting spurs, ideally. That means nipping out these little side shoots that you find in the branches just there. Just nip those out like that, and they just come away ever so easily. And we'll just put them away from the plant. Now sometimes you find quite a big one where it's been allowed to grow perhaps a little bit longer than it should. We've got an example of that over here. So this plant here has got a couple of side shoots, quite big. Now we can do something with these. So there's 2 of them on that plant. In fact, there's some more further up. So I've got here just a little pot, just a little glass of water, piece of foil on top from a yogurt pot. I'm just going to put those tomato plants, those tomato cuttings, down there, if I can, so that their stems are in the water. Let's just have a look at that from the side, so we can verify, yeah, the stems are in the water there. And those will just root. Tomato plants root really easily in water, and that will give me 2 more tomato plants. I'm not sure where I'm going to put them, but I might grow some outdoors. So that will give me another couple of plants of, that one is honeycomb, I think. So yeah, we'll grow that one outdoors. These are brown peas and black-eyed beans, and I planted some of these outside in the garden, directly into the soil. I might have been a little bit hasty and planted them when it's still a little bit too cold out there, so I'm not sure that they're going to grow outside, because I have a feeling that these are from slightly warmer climates than we've got here, at least at this time of year. So I've taken a little handful of each of those and soaked them in some water, and they've actually started to sprout. So I'm going to plant these in some little pots or something, and then we'll grow them on a little bit indoors, and then we can plant them out as plants. I've got these are compost discs, and it's just a compressed little brick of compost. I think it's got some kind of biodegradable wrapping around it, and we just give these a soak, and they will pop up to several times their size, and then we can poke a hole in the top. There's actually already a hole in them, and we'll be able to plant the plants in them. Gosh, you can see them going already, look at that. So now these have had a chance to soak a little bit, they've swelled right up, and that's what they're like beforehand, just little sort of biscuit type things, and you soak them in water and they just pop up like that. I'm going to plant the beans into these. So actually what I might do is I'll tip out the beans into here so I can handle them carefully without damaging them, and also I can pick out the ones that have sprouted. We'll have a stick to make a proper hole in the middle so that I can get the bean right down in there. Let me take one of these little beans that's already sprouting and drop it down in there. Now I will cover that over with some compost when I got these all packed up. So that's the plan. I'll just slightly enlarge that hole. Get a bean in there. Right, that's the plan. I'll just do a whole bunch of those. One thing I kind of discovered along the way is rather than just trying to poke a hole in them, it's actually better to squeeze them a little bit like that and just loosen up the compost in the thing. They open up a bit, and then it's a lot easier to get in the seed, which is very delicate at this point with its little root exposed. So we do have to be ever so careful with these things. This is not the way I would normally grow beans. I would normally just put them in the soil and wait for nature to take its course. But I wanted to kind of get to the point where I had guaranteed germinating seeds. So I was told, apparently, I think I made a mistake in the video when I was planting these, because I assumed, because so many culinary beans are all just actually the same species, nearly all of the beans that we actually commonly cook with are just varieties of
common beans, and so they're all the same species. Apparently black-eye beans are a different species. They are the same thing as the brown peas, in fact, apparently. So yeah, I made a mistake there. Or perhaps we should say I learned something. These little compost discs will be particularly good for beans because beans don't like their roots disturbed. So once they're growing, they really don't like being shaken out of the pot and planted into, you know, all the soil shaken off, planted into something else. They don't get on well with that. Right, that's all of them. As I say, a bit of compost over the top of that. We'll put the lid on and wait for something to happen.
So here in the downstairs greenhouse, my artichoke plants are coming along nicely. I potted them on and they're picking up very nicely. They've had a little bit of feed now, so they're starting to really put on some growth. The beans up the top, which were yard-long beans comprising black-eye peas and brown peas, didn't do very well, but this is the ones I started in those little peat-free modules, and we've got a very high germination rate here. So once we get a little bit more thorough germination, I can see them coming up all over the place here. So once we know what we've got, I will harden them off. They won't need much hardening off now because there's no more frosts, but I'll just leave them outdoors for a few days and bring them back in at night, and then after that they can be planted out. And then my tomato plants from seed finally have decided to do something. Not very many of them, so that's a money maker there. That one's Gardener's Delight. But I haven't got any more grow bag spaces in the greenhouse now, so those are going to go in pots. I think we'll grow them somewhere on a patio or somewhere out the front here by the herb patch. Maybe at the back of the herb patch we'll grow some tomatoes in pots. My chilies are making a slow start, but they're getting somewhere now. I reckon we're probably about ready to plant those out into the grow bags up in the upstairs greenhouse. So these I have been hardening off, which basically means take them out of the greenhouse every day during the day, put them back in at night, and gradually acclimatise them to the outdoors so that they don't experience any shock when they're planted out here for real, which is going to happen today. So let's get tools and go and plant these beans. Now I know these are wanting to go out because if we look underneath, you can see all the roots there. Those roots are kind of looking for deeper soil now. I've got other things coming up here, but I don't know what they are, so those are going to come out. I'll get some weeds out of here. These beans, they are roughly divided into two different varieties, and I can't remember which one's which now, but it doesn't matter because they are essentially the same species, they're just different varieties. So I probably need to get in there with the foot with the trowel first. So that's what we've got. I'll get you a close view of that. So you can see, very nice healthy looking bean plant, lots of little roots coming out the bottom looking for deeper soil. Today is the day they'll get what they want. And I think what I'll do with these, not all of them have germinated, so I'm just going to pick the ones that have, and I'll give the other ones a little bit more chance. So I'm just going to share them out first. I'll put them in place first and then plant them all in a batch in a minute, and that way I'll get as even a planting as I can manage. I'm quite surprised they didn't all come up because all of these that I planted were showing little shoots, little roots, but you know, time and chance takes its toll. I reckon we're going to have about 3 or 4 plants per pole. Right, about 3 or 4 plants per pole. That's the remnants. I don't even know that I'm going to bother trying to continue growing those. I might just compost what's left there. So now I'll just get them in. A smaller trowel might help actually, I think. And I will give these some protection. I might put some netting around this whole plot because the pigeons will tend to come and just eat the shoots of things like this. Now these beans are different from your runner beans and your French beans. They are a different species, different group of beans, but they can either be left to grow pods that fully develop and then we harvest the right beans, or they can be picked green and cooked as green beans. They do apparently grow really long vines. So these canes I've got in here, they're only about 6 foot tall, aren't going to be big enough. But that's fine, because if they do make it to the top of this structure that I've made here, I'll just extend it. I'll extend it along. I'll make a kind of trellis that goes along, and we'll let them grow along and dangle off of that. So once we've got them in there, these are going to need careful watering every day until they've got their roots down and they can look after themselves. Right, quick review. We're at the start of June now. Tomatoes are really taking off. I have not been nearly diligent enough at pinching out the side shoots on these tomatoes, so they have bushed out a little bit. You're meant to pinch out all the side shoots so that they grow a single stem. I just haven't done that. So we're going to have kind of bushy tomato plants. I need to tie them in a little bit more. But there's lots of flower. There are probably already tiny tomatoes. Yep, look, there. So just need to keep watering and feeding. Cucumbers and melons looking really great. Starting to climb. Again, I've tied that one in. That one I think is going to do on its own. The aubergine plant's looking really strong and sturdy now. Peppers have got a bit of weird curling on the leaves. I wonder if there's an aphid or something on them. Peppers here have got a bit of curl to them as well, and the hot peppers along the front here. I'll have to look into that, see what causes that kind of leaf curl. Could be some nutrient thing, or it could be an insect or something. Anyway, these are the yard long beans, taking their time to get going, but starting to get somewhere now. They've got several sets of leaves and they're looking like they might take off any moment. Potatoes looking really strong and healthy. Leeks, we kind of lost a few, but there's still more than half of them left and they're looking good. I need to do a little bit of weeding here carefully. Runner beans starting to run now, starting to climb up these poles. So those are taking off. Broad beans are looking fantastic. Look at all this flower. I'll probably in a day or two just pinch out the tops to stop them and let them put all of their energy into flowers rather than growing taller. Also pinching out the tops helps to prevent black fly getting on them, I think. Now it is interesting, you'll note that the sides of the leaves have got little bite marks out of them in some places. I think that's pea and bean weevil eating the sides of the leaves there. Don't really mind. There are places where there's a larger bite taken out of the leaf. That could be one of them there. There's a few of them where like a semicircular chunk has been taken out of the side of the leaf. Quite almost like the size of a penny. Now, I know what that is because I happened to spot the other day a leafcutter bee down by the front gate carrying away a piece of broad bean leaf. I just managed to catch it as it disappeared into a crack in an old dead stump. And I don't mind the leafcutter bees having a few bits of leaf from this plant, because while they're visiting it to do that, they'll also be pollinating all of these flowers, which is great. I did notice that there's a bit of black fly there on the stems of these broad beans, so I'm just going to wash those off with water. They're being farmed by ants there. You can see little black fly, black aphids, and there's an ant crawling all over them, and the ant is farming the black fly. Anyway, yeah, we're going to rinse those off and keep them in control that way. What? Courgettes, really taking off nicely. I've sunk a pot in next to each plant and I water into the pot. That helps me keep the dosage of water sufficient for each plant, but also it means I only water the plant itself and I'm not watering all this bare soil, so I'm not watering the weeds so much, and also keeping the top surface of the soil dry inhibits the slugs and snails from crossing and eating the plants. Obviously if it rains, that all bets are off, but when it's not raining, watering into a pot like that helps to sort of focus the water to the plant, but it also keeps everything else that's competing with the plant or going to eat the plant somewhat in check. Rhubarb. The rhubarb is now taking off. Lovely new leaves on it. There's another new leaf down there, you can see. I've been feeding the rhubarb and the courgettes with liquid plant food that I'm making. You'll see the recipe for that later in this video. My feral potatoes, or volunteer potatoes, that just came up in here. Obviously this compost wasn't very well rotted when it went on here, because we got 3 volunteer potatoes, maybe 4 actually. I think there's another one over there. Is that a separate plant? Yep, there's another one there. So 4 volunteer potatoes, lots of volunteer squash, that's one there, that's another one over there, and volunteer tomatoes, another one there. I'm just going to leave them actually. I'll weed everything else in here. That's a opium poppy. I'll weed everything else, but I think we'll leave the potatoes and squashes and we'll see what happens to them. This is a rather healthy looking specimen of chickweed. I will pick some of this and eat it, and then I might weed the rest of it out. I probably should have mentioned actually, I replaced that fine black mesh with this wide green mesh in most places, just so the bees can get into the flowers here. And same thing with the courgettes, except that this stuff is a bit too easy for the wind to get through, and wind is the enemy of courgette plants, especially when they're getting their roots down. Once they get a bit bigger and stronger, they'll be fine, but with these big leaves, the wind will just rock them about and destroy the root. So that's why I put this black mesh back around, this finer mesh, because that's just acting as a bit of a windbreak for them. The sunlight can still get in and help them grow, but the black mesh will just help keep the wind off them. In other news, I've got lots of elder trees here at Shrimp Cottage, and they're just starting to flower. Now I am going to make some elderflower fizz this year, some kind of, they used to call it elderflower champagne, but anyway, so we've got quite a few elder trees here, but I'm not going to pick flowers from here because I want the berries here, and also want the flowers here to attract the pollinators. So I will probably go out and pick some from the hedgerows, because there's quite a lot of elder around the place. But we'll do something with elderflower fairly soon. I just want to show you something that illustrates a point I made in an earlier video about the fact that when we moved in here to Shrimp Cottage, we decided not to just dig everything up and plant our own plants wholesale, but rather try to discover what was already here before we make significant changes. We have made a few changes. We've planted herbs in front of the greenhouse there because that area was just bulbs, just Spanish bluebells. So we've put a little herb garden down there in front of the greenhouse, which is good. But here's a plant we didn't know was here until it came up. This is a Tradescantia. I mean, it's quite a common plant. It's not especially exotic. I think a lot of gardens probably have this, but it's a beautiful plant. I really like it. It is the best colour. And we wouldn't have known that was there if we'd just dug over here in winter. We'd have found a little cluster of roots or something and possibly discarded them, because it's a herbaceous perennial. It dies right down to the ground every year. So there we go, Tradescantia, and this beautiful rose. Of course, we did know this rose was here, but we didn't know what it was going to do. And it's a mass of pink and white marshmallowy flowers. Slight, not an overpowering scent, slight sort of lemony rose scent, but look at all the flower that's still to come. So that was the rationale for that, really, was to try to understand what it is we've got here before we go and make a bunch of changes. Eva, can you come out of there? Eva, out. This here is snake's head fritillary. We found, I think there's obviously been a pot of, hey, no, hey! This here is snake's head fritillary. It's gone to seed now, but I think there must have been a pot, and then they've planted the pot out here after flowering, and so it's continued going. Now what I'm going to do here is collect these seeds, the ones that are split open already. Might need a little bit longer. I think those might. They are starting to come out. I think we'll take these up to the upstairs garden. And we've got our kind of meadow bank here that we're creating. So I think they're quite appropriate to be planted in there. So I'm just going to scatter these along, these seeds. I'm not going to try and actually grow them as plants. I'm just going to scatter the seeds and let them take their chances. There we go. So we might have snake's head fritillaries here in a year or two. Hey, hey, out. Okay, this is slightly embarrassing. I had completely forgotten about these tomato cuttings that I left on the windowsill. And not only have they rooted, but We've actually tried to flower. Poor little tomato plant is trying to produce offspring here before it dies. I don't know where I'm going to plant these because I've got a garden full of, I've got a greenhouse full of tomato plants and also some in the garden, but I'll find a place. So we'll put this in a pot and we'll see what it does. So out here in the downstairs greenhouse, I've just got this clay pot. I think we'll just use that. It's not very big, but I don't think this tomato plant's going to do very much. I'm just going to fill this pot up with compost. This is a peat-free potting compost that contains composted wool. Let's have a look and see what we actually got then. So we've got 3 plants. That's the one I'm going to plant in here. Look at all those roots, amazing. Any part of the tomato stem will just root when it touches the ground. That little plant there, I suppose if I go for a bigger pot I could plant all 3 of those in there, couldn't I? Let's do that. Okay, bigger pot. I'll just carefully place a crock over the hole there to stop the compost washing out. Okay, that'll do. And I'll just create a hole for that there, that big one. And we'll tuck down all those roots down there. Same for these others. This is really just an experiment. I don't think I need these tomato plants as such because I've got so many tomato plants in the greenhouse and elsewhere. But I think it would be interesting just to carry on this experiment and see what these do. So there we go. Okay, and I'll just place these here, I think, in front of the herb patch. And we'll keep an eye on those over coming weeks and see what they get up to. Not really expecting much, but it'd be quite interesting to carry on this experiment and see what we get. So that's the garden update at the start of June. Right, today we're going to make a bin juice compost bin. This is just going to be a bin for composting plant material in order to make plant food. There are lots of different ways of doing this. There is a wet method where you just put leaves and things into water and it makes a very nutritious but incredibly stinky compost. That's not the version we're doing. We're doing the aerobic version today. So I just need to drill a couple of little drain holes in this old bin. This is an old bin that was left here by the previous residents. I don't know what's done that damage. Interesting. Something's just taken repeated chunks out of it. No idea what that is. It looks like it. I don't know. Anyway, so just going to drill, I think actually just one drain hole in here because I'm going to put mesh inside as a drainage sort of platform. That'll do it. And I don't want bits of plastic all over the garden, so I will sweep up all those little bits and dispose of them carefully. Then inside of this bin there are going to be 2 bricks like that, and with mesh on top. So I need a piece of mesh that's going to fit across those 2 bricks. So let's have a look. That is going to be about 38 centimeters diameter. Right, this doesn't have to be pretty, it just has to be pretty close. So I'm just going to fold in the corners, that'll give it a bit of extra strength anyway. Yep, good enough. Just to give it a bit of extra support, I think I'll go for 3 bricks like that. Right, we're going to need something to catch that delicious bin juice when it comes out, so I've just got this old juice bottle and I've cut a piece out the side here. We're going to slide that underneath and it'll drip down into there. Right, so we've got this space here, a couple of bricks each side, and then I'm just going to position this bin so the hole is over the gap in between the bricks. Something like that. And then I just need to make sure that my container is underneath the hole, which it is. Stinging nettles we have in ample supply. Stinging nettles on their own will tend to make quite a high nitrogen fertilizer, so I'm going to mix it with other weeds. I'm going to add in some sow thistle, some comfrey, whatever else is kind of growing but not going to seed at the moment. and that'll balance out the nutrition in the fertilizer that comes out. So as to why I'm not composting in this area, in the existing composting area, there is, as always, a method to my madness, because this process will work better if the sun is on the bin. So yeah, it all goes in there. Sow thistle, nettles. Later on I'll go and pick some comfrey and get that in there as well. And you can target the kind of compost you want to make, the kind of feed you want to make. So if you put in mostly nettles, you'll get a high nitrogen compost that's very good for plants that are growing and putting on green growth. Potatoes, anything that's growing tall. Later on you'll want a bit more phosphorus and potassium, so comfrey is really good for that, but I'm going to put it all in there and get a kind of balanced feed. But that's not nearly full enough at the moment. There's some dandelions, minus the roots and flowers. It's probably not a great idea to put too much root in there. I'm avoiding putting seeds and roots in there. I don't think they grow in here anyway, but at the end of the sort of composting process I want to be able to put this directly on the vegetable patch, because what's left in here will be very good for conditioning soil. And then this will need pressing down, so just to distribute the weight a little bit at the top, I'm going to cut a piece of this plastic. It doesn't even need to fit very exactly. I'll find those bits in a minute. There we go. That's my weight, and I'll just put a brick on top of that. I do need to put some water in there just to moisten things off, start them rotting down. Right, so a little bit of water in there, which will help it start to break down. That'll get all the bacteria going, but this will also give me a chance to test that I've positioned the barrel with the drain hole in the right place, because we should be seeing, yes we are. So we've got water draining out the bottom into the right place, that's good. Obviously I'm going to let that go because that's just plain water at the moment. That goes on there, that goes under there, and that goes on there. And now we wait. It might be a couple of weeks, it might actually be quite a bit shorter because it's nice and warm at the moment, and when the sunlight gets on this tomorrow morning, this will heat up and composting will really take off in there. It's been only about a week since I started this bin juice plant food compost bin here, and I've been topping it up with additional weeds, soft weeds when I find them, and every now and again I put a bit of water in there. It has started to produce results now. So I swapped out the plastic container I had there for this old tin can, and you can see, well, there's something in there. I'm going to have a sniff of this because when you use the wet method of producing plant food like this, it really stinks. So I'm going to have a sniff and see what this is like. Hardly has any smell at all. Obviously it's not appetizing, but it's also not offensive. Mostly neutral. It smells ever so slightly of compost, of sort of earthy, slightly decomposed vegetation. It doesn't stink. So now I'm going to decant this into a bottle just for storage, and then we can use some of it on the garden. And as time goes on, this will get darker and stronger. That little bit that's in there now is going to save about that much of it, and I'll put that in my watering can now, and we'll go and water the potatoes with it. This in the bottle here I can just add to the watering can in little splashes. About sort of 5% dilution, but I'm going to probably go for less than that just to err on the side of caution. It will provide some food even if it's quite a weak concentration. Once it gets started, the liquid produced will get darker and darker until it's almost like a kind of coffee colour. And I'm just going to add that to the bottle. And it'll keep on producing. If it slows down a little bit, you can just put a bit of water in there, just water it in the top, and that'll help it to keep going. Now there are a couple of potential pitfalls with this method of liquid composting. The first one is, how do we figure out what the composition of this is in terms of nitrogen, phosphates, potassium? Well, we kind of can't without sending this off for detailed testing. We have to kind of make assumptions. We can tailor it though based on what we put in there. If you put lots of nettles in there, you get high nitrogen. If you put comfrey in, you get phosphates and potassium. If you put a wide variety of different soft weeds and plant pieces from your garden in there, you should get a fairly balanced fertilizer in terms of nutrients, because basically anything that was in those plants when they were growing, keeping them alive, becomes available as nutrients in this liquid. The other problem is we don't really know the concentration of nutrients in here, and I think the best way to deal with that is just really to err on the side of caution in terms of dilution. I know some people do dilute this 1 to 5, so or 1 to 4, like a 20% solution of this to water. I'm going to err way on the side of caution and just put one of these little cups, that's about 100 ml, in a 5 litre watering can, which I'll then top off with water. That's quite a weak solution, but it will still help. It'll still help feed the plants. Because your plants probably need more water than you're actually giving them anyway, and too much fertiliser at the roots can actually burn the roots. It can give the roots chemical burns, whereas a little bit too much water is just going to drain away if you have a free draining soil. So a weaker dilution is probably safer than a stronger one. Then the plants will find those nutrients and take them up anyway. So that is bin juice, natural plant fertiliser, almost free to make, and if you've got the space to do it, why not? I hope it's been interesting. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.